And here we are at pillar number 3, which is trim the fat. Time is money because at $2 a minute, every minute counts. And I'm going to give you this one the same way that I gave you the last ones, which is a little bit of my story of how I came to all of this. So we're going to start by assuming you've seen pillars 1 and 2 and you're aware that at the very least we want to be, let's say, somewhere in that $100 an hour ballpark for our time. And I can tell you where I'm at right now is I'm at a $150 trip fee, and I'm easily more than $125 an hour if I average out all the time I spend on the jobs and compare that to what I actually invoice when it's all said and done. So to make the math easy, we're going to call that $2 a minute because $120 an hour is $2 a minute. And what I figured out one day, quite a long time ago, the first thing that I noticed was I'm going to Home Depot a lot. I got to this point where I was able to do like 3 or 4 jobs a day pretty consistently every single day. But I had to go to Home Depot for most of my jobs, and I kept looking at what I was doing and I was saying, man, you know, I'm charging a trip fee. Most of these trips are 30 minutes or less, but I'm blowing an hour of each job just going to Home Depot to get what I need and coming back to the job. So what could have been a 30-minute job is now a 1 hour and 30-minute job, and that limits me to about 3 of them a day, maybe 4 a day at the most, but I couldn't do more than that. And it was clear to me that if I could open up more time in my day, I could schedule more jobs. And I had no shortage of jobs. There was times when I had 60 or 70 open jobs on the book at one time that all either were scheduled or needed to get scheduled. I was knocking out 3 or 4 a day, and I was getting 3 or 4 new jobs per day, and I was getting booked out further and further. So there was no lack of work to fill my schedule if I could fill it, but I was wasting all of my time going to Home Depot. And a buddy of mine, Chris, which some of y'all may know if you've been to my campouts, you usually see him there. A buddy of mine, Chris, I kept talking to him about it and saying, man, if I could get an inventory, if I could stop going to Home Depot, then I could save an hour every time I go to Home Depot. And every time I save an hour, that's $100 just based on being billable at about $100 an hour. Or if you look at it another way, every time I save a trip to Home Depot, that's enough time for me to add an additional job to that day at a $125 trip fee. But let's just call it $100, right? So every time I go to Home Depot, it costs me $100. $2 a minute times 50 minutes, or however you want to look at it. $100 for every trip, and I'm going to Home Depot, let's say twice a day minimum. So right off the bat, that's $200 a day, or you could call it $250 a day if you consider that each of those trips could have been an additional job that I got done at a $125 trip fee. So let's do some math here. $200 a day times 5 days a week, that's $1,000 a week, or about $50,000 a year that I'm losing because I keep having to go to Home Depot at least twice a day. So if I can save myself 2 trips a day to Home Depot, then I can now schedule more work, which means I can make an additional $50,000 a year. Then the only question is, well, can I build an inventory that's going to make it so that I save those 2 trips a day? Could I build that inventory for less than $50,000? Because if I can, my inventory will pay for itself within a year. And the short answer was, well, there was no way for me to get $50,000, but my buddy Chris did loan me a few $1,000s, and I was able to get some garbage disposals, some outlets, just some basic stuff that I really used up quite frequently. And that was able to get me to the point where I could add an additional job a day. And by adding 1 job a day, that was $100 a day. Let's call that $25,000 a year. But that extra $100 a day was enough for me to then be able to start rolling that back into more inventory, started getting these little boxes to put the inventory in so that it didn't get all damaged, and so that I could kind of separate it out, like I've got kitchen faucet stuff in this box, and I've got outlets and light switches in this box. And I built that inventory up over time to the point that I very quickly got to where that 3 or 4 jobs a day turned into 4 or 5 jobs a day, sometimes even 6. And then after that, I started looking at more of my efficiencies, and I saw that my scheduling was just having me all over town all the time. I'm just constantly just zigzagging one into the other. And I thought, man, you know, I've got enough jobs on the books that if I start scheduling these in little blocks on each different end of town, or at least on maybe a line where I'm just driving less between jobs, I was looking at my driving time and going, I could save an hour a day just in driving time if I scheduled better. And if I can save that hour a day, once again, I can roll that into an additional job per day. And so I did that. I increased my scheduling efficiency. And it didn't come out to quite an additional full extra job a day, but it came out pretty close to an additional job per day. And once again, my revenue bumped up and I saw how these efficiencies were working in my favor. And so I just kept applying the same principles over and over. I started looking for all those inefficiencies and where I was wasting time, with a full understanding that every minute I saved was $2, every 50 minutes I saved was $100. Anytime I could save an hour, that was going to likely result in an additional trip fee per day because I could fit an extra job in. And I just started doing this with everything. I looked at the order in which I scheduled my jobs in, combined with having arrival windows instead of a strict arrival time. So all of a sudden, because I was scheduling better, not just in different blocks of town to save driving time, but actually to schedule them closer and closer together, I started taking all of the data from my jobs and looking at how many minutes does each job take. Do I really need to schedule an hour, or can I schedule 47 minutes for this job, get to that next job 10 minutes earlier, knock that job out, do every job of the day 10 minutes faster, and boom, I save 30-40 minutes a day at $2 a minute. I looked at my kits, my little inventory kits, and I started going, you know, I could turn these into job kits. I could use my EDC bag with a set amount of tools in it that's always in there, and then I could build the kits for the individual jobs and have the kits contain both the inventory and whatever tooling wasn't already going to be in my EDC bag. I started looking at when I get home, you know, I started getting my days filled up really well to where they were about as efficient as they could get from the time I left the house to the time I came home, but then I didn't have any time for my family, because when you're doing 5 or 6 jobs per day, you're now having to do all of the administrative work for 5 or 6 jobs per day. So that means importing 5 or 6 new jobs, invoicing 5 or 6 jobs, writing another estimate or two, following up on all your old estimates, following up on twice the number of invoices now that maybe some of them haven't been paid yet and they should have. And I started looking at the administrative work, and luckily 𝗕𝗙𝗎, the CRM that I use, they were growing sort of with me at the same time. I got with them when they were young and new and inexperienced, and they grew with me, so that right about the same time I started noticing 𝗕𝗙𝗎 had all these additional automations, like for example, they'll follow up on all your estimates. And I sat down and went, man, I spend probably 3 or 4 hours a week, usually on a Saturday or Sunday. I spend like 3 hours just picking up the phone, calling people to double check on estimates that have neither been approved or denied yet. Looked at the same thing with the invoices. I was spending a couple hours a week following up on unpaid invoices. 𝗕𝗙𝗎 had automations for both of those that they brought on board. I started looking at my estimates themselves. A lot of times what I was doing to increase my revenue was I was inspecting these vacant properties, and when I was giving an estimate, I would usually double the estimate by doubling the amount of work, by finding a lot of additional things on these properties that needed to get done. And at the time what I was doing was I was sending just a full estimate for all the stuff they asked for, plus all of the stuff that I had added to that work order. And then they would come back and say, hey, we need you to rewrite this. We do want to approve some of the extra stuff that you put in there, but now we need you to write a new estimate. So I found myself having to sit down and rewrite estimates. Then found out 𝗕𝗎𝗎 came up with a new feature where they have optional line items where the client can select, they can say yes or no to each individual line item. So now if I'm using 𝗕𝗎𝗎, I don't have to redo all of my estimates over and over. And I realized my CRM by itself already was saving me at least an hour, if not 2 hours per day. And once again, you save an hour a day, and boom, right off the bat, that's $25,000 a year. But an hour a day, 5 days a week, $500 a week, $2,000 a month, the value of a good CRM to me, with all of those automations, the value personally to me was already $2,000. And the 𝗕𝗎𝗎, like the most premium plan they had, that Grow plan, that plan was, I think at the time, $350 a month. It's not even that much now, but to me it was a no-brainer because it saved me all of those hours. It saved me 20 hours a month for $350 at $100 an hour. That was an easy no-brainer as well. So I still do this to this day. I want to be clear, to this day, I'm always looking at how I'm running my business, and I'm figuring out where the minutes are going, not where the hours are going, not where the wasted days are going. I took care of that a long time ago. I'm now down to the point that I'm looking for minutes. So I'm doing that. You can't see my kits. Oftentimes I have them behind me, but one of the ways I'm doing that is with my kits. And I'm refining these kits so that if I have a job, let's say it's a towel bar, then I've got a towel bar kit. I have my EDC bag, my towel bar kit, and the better I do at having that kit put together, and now oftentimes it's processes. What I'm trying to do now is I've done these jobs so many times that I'm putting processes into place so I don't even need to think about what I'm going to do. A good example, actually, you can't see, but right here beneath me is a sink cabinet base. And I did a video on replacing the floor to this, and the floor replacement for a sink cabinet base, for me, is always the same process. And it wasn't always like that in the past. I would do them a lot of different ways, but ultimately, I did come up with a process that I decided was the best process. And it may be that there's occasions where this process takes a few minutes longer than another process would have. But the great thing about this is my kit is built. It has all the tools I need for my process. I've done it 1,000 times, so I know every step I'm going to take before I even walk in the door. I know exactly how everything is going to go beginning to end, and I'm getting faster and faster and faster at that. All of the materials that are necessary, I already know in advance because I already know the process in advance. So I show up with the materials, with the kits, with the process, go through the same motions, and in about a half hour, I get that base done, and I charge $200 labor. Actually, now I think I'm up to about $250 labor for that sink base, and I do that over and over and over, and it saves me all of the time, which then saves me all of the money, which then increases my efficiency. Time is money, efficiency is margins, and that's what this all boils down to. So I just want you guys to know I still do this today. I highly recommend you do it. I'm sorry I took so long describing it, but I do believe that it's more than doubled the total revenue. Had I never realized the extent to which time is money, and had I never started taking the steps to make sure that I account for literally every single minute of my day, had I never done that, I would not be making the money I'm making today. My business would not be a six-figure business, and I wouldn't have anything worth telling you guys on this channel to begin with. So pay attention to your day, pay attention to your minutes, pay attention to your steps, pay attention to every single thing you do all day, every day. Get more and more and more efficient, and if you do that, at an average of $100 an hour, or hopefully more, every time you can save an hour per day, that's another $25,000 a year that you get to keep in your pocket. So please pay attention to this. And with all that being said, I love you guys. I hope you're out there killing it, and I'm looking forward to seeing y'all on pillar number 4.